All right, welcome back to the Visionary Sanctum podcast. Today we're back with another fun solo episode where we all started. And on this episode, I'm definitely going to hop into my experience finally getting into my director's bag. From the very first episode up until now has been me telling the story of myself and my overall artist development. And now you are able to see other folks in my community share that same experience. So first things first, we're going to hop into the check-in. And I would say right now, like what I wrote on my notes was activated, but I'm feeling a few different things. I'm feeling activated and I'm feeling confident and grounded. I recently just finished watching Seen and Heard, which is a 2-part documentary done by Issa Rae about Black folks in media. Watching it just reinvigorated something in me about the power of Black folks, the power of us using our voices and representing ourselves within media. And that second part with Oprah and Tyler Perry, it really just drove home the power of ownership, the power of owning your own brand and your own likeness and being fully 100% in control. I think that definitely spoke to myself and spoke to my journey of what all of this is, me building this personal brand, a space that's my own platform where I have control over the narratives that I tell, control over who is going to be on this page, control over my own image. And all the work that I've done prior to this, being in real estate and the real estate process really teaching me about entrepreneurship and what it means to do business. All of these things are connected and they are important. And while that real estate piece, I kind of had like a bit of a negative outlook on that rough start that I had. But after watching that, I'm like, all this stuff is connected and all of these things are absolutely necessary. And it was necessary for me to begin all of this media platform of my own at this time once all of these dots have begun to connect. And I was meant to see that documentary to see and show myself just how much things are connecting. And then a lot of the political stuff going on. I know y'all seen the stuff about, oh boy, who got in the nick. Definitely his situation taught me the power of the tongue. Girl, you gotta watch out the type of stuff that you say. Sheesh. Because you never know, it might come back and get you, literally. It also made me think about, as somebody with a sociology degree, okay, I do understand that the self is inherently political. Me being a Black woman and saying that my voice matters and the voices of my community matter, and so I'm going to platform these people is in itself politics, personal politics, all of that. But I kind of want to get even more political, talk a little bit more about current events and just throw those into how those apply. But just in case anybody was unsure, this platform in itself is political. We are about curatorial justice and uplifting the voices that are pushed down, giving a microphone, a megaphone to folks who are silenced. And this is a space for people to tell their stories. BIPOC creatives over here, BIPOC is with a capital B. I'm not going to hold you because this platform is created by a Black woman. So I will be lifting primarily Black voices, but I'm all about unity, community, and rising together. Okay. Somebody coming up in here and telling you about their story as an artist is political. And in itself, it is revolutionary to be able to do so, to be able to create your own platforms on Beyonce's internet rather than having to go through traditional channels. And I also want people to listen to what is possible. There is a route, a line, a way, a path that we're all told to take, especially after COVID. For those of us within my age range, I'm 25, but specifically folks right now who are between the ages of 22 and 25, we really got fucked in terms of how that traditional path is. You graduate college and then you get the job and then you go through that entire process. Girl, what? All of that is behind, all of that is delayed. And rather than being so frustrated in isolation, I want other people to be able to see the experiences of other folks in situations alike, to say, hey, I couldn't follow that traditional path. That traditional path in itself now, because of all the things that have happened, it was never truly guaranteed in the first place. And in this life, even though there will be roadblocks, even though I may be met with resistance and oppression, I'm still here to do whatever the fuck I set out to do. And I hope each and every one of you feel those stories and you feel and you hear just that. So that's into my check-in, girl. We're activated and it's political, period. So I'm going to give you a rough outline of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. I recently went to an event by Adobe, so that was fun. So we'll do that. Then I'm going to talk about some of the things that I learned from doing my first ever short doc and some reflections as a director, which I'm thinking about making as like a fun segment moving forward because there are more projects coming up. So I feel like that'd be fun little bit. And then some of the creative expansion that I experienced. And then today's word, instead of finding peace or grounding or people and community, it's going to be about resistance. Okay? Because that's what we're doing. Side note, before we hop into the piece about Adobe, prior to this, I shot the second documentary. Y'all haven't seen it yet. You're watching this episode. I'm so sorry. Whatever. Okay. But prior to this episode, I shot doc number 2, and the person I shot is actually a photographer, and she showed me how to shoot manuals. This is my first time shooting manual, and I look good. Like I could look extra buttery and chocolatey and delicious, and you can almost see that this wall is green. Because if you're looking a little tan, a little faded and whatnot, but I keep looking at myself in the mirror because I'm like, ooh, who is she? She is me. Okay, Adobe. My experience at the Adobe Create Now, or it's like Creative Now or something like that, creative video thing I went to was dope. Someone I'm following on Instagram, she's a director, G-Co Films, Gracie Co, and her stuff is incredible, and she was the speaker. So she posted the event. I signed up. It was free. Girl, they had open bar and the food was incredible. And there was so much food. It was flowing. This is my kind of vibe. So, on a full stomach and some wine, I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to mingle with the girls. I'm going to be honest with you. And within that space, I have been to many networking events. Most of the business networking events that I have dealt with were related to real estate. I've become a lot more confident over time in those spaces, but this is the first networking event where I wore exactly like what I would just wear to any creative space anyway, and I looked really good. I felt really cute, which helped in my confidence, and I was just so comfortable to be able to float around the room and really connect with all the different creatives. Like usually I have a little bit of apprehension. I'm like, forcing myself to speak a little bit more at real estate related things. But since I'm so passionate about creativity and it's something that I'm actively doing and I have something to show for it now, I think I was almost done in post on that first doc, so I could tell people what to look out for and what was coming. So that was great. But conversation was able to flow because it was a space that I was meant to be in. And while there talking to folks, I learned a lot about filmmakers and what filmmakers do to pay the bills. So fun fact, the real estate. In my mind, I was going to get into real estate so that I had a flow of cash where my schedule could be flexible and it would allow me to properly fund my creative endeavors, because filmmaking in itself is a very expensive medium. And in terms of side hustles or ways to receive commission, real estate would be the highest paying and the most accessible for me to get to out of all the different options that I had. So that was my idea. But many filmmakers do other things to pay the bills. And that's when I learned, the girls, they work for nonprofits. It's kind of like, instead of me being like, I'm going to support myself, my entrepreneurial endeavor with another entrepreneurial endeavor, there's more stable options. But yeah, it's like when girls who are in marketing and they're artists and they're graphic designers and things, but they have that marketing corporate piece to pay the bills, or brand strategists or whatever, stuff like that. It's still a creative realm, but you're salaried. And I never thought about what filmmakers do. I just thought they all did some indie shit and they're making a ton of money. That was ignorance, naivete, if you will. So seeing that a lot of them had smaller private media companies that had their own crews and they were getting hired by nonprofits to tell the story of whatever the nonprofit was performing, or maybe a facet off of journalism, doing short docs based off of those, producing for the news, stuff like that. So as I get further in and continue to gain more experience as I'm making my making and producing and directing my own stuff, what other opportunities can open up for me. It's one thing to hope opportunity comes up, but it's another thing to have a better or a clearer sight of what that could be or what that might mean. Because this realm is new to me, and I'm just a sponge and excited to learn more. So that event definitely opened up my horizon, and I think it also added a bunch of new eyes. So obviously the girls on social media, they're watching, like you're watching, and you might be one of the girls from social media. I've received like a good amount of love and support, considering that my following on Instagram, like this current page, is pretty small. The support is deep because these are people I've built community with. So very, very happy about that. It's nice now, after networking, to have community eyes or networking eyes that are within the industry. So that opens up way more opportunity to be directly with that source or other folks that I can platform and collaborate with. Is really, really cool. There was a different event I went to that's not necessarily related to the creative stuff. They are like event curating group called What the Girls Are Doing. And one of the founders vlogs and does like social media stuff on like, and does YouTube and things like that. And I saw their vlog. Their vlog was edited pretty well. It's really cute. And I could tell they did it on their phone from a variety of shots, and it looked clean, incredible. It was fun. It kept your attention and all that stuff. And I went to another one of their events, and they said to me, your podcast is really good. And I'm like, new eyes. Like I be forgetting. Sometimes I think I'm posting into the void, but I'm not. Like, this stuff is impactful. It is landing exactly where it needs to go. And I knew it was doing the same thing with some of those incredible filmmakers that I connected with and may one day possibly collaborate with, or we'll see. But basically after that entire event, just altogether, I feel a lot more comfortable showing up as a producer. And I definitely do now that I have produced my first short documentary. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, now let's move on to the next piece, which is what I learned after creating my first doc. Throughout the entire process, I really learned about my creative process, my creative flow as a producer. And in this case, I got to direct too, within pre-production and then production and post-production as well. Like, what does it mean to tell a story? How much of the story is kind of outlined before you get there and do the documentary piece? What kind of questions do I need to ask in order to show this person in a great light, but also show just how incredible and expansive that this artist is within their space? That requires at least some sort of background knowledge about what that person has going on. And it goes back to something I've talked about in previous episodes, which is me being the business of relationships. It's definitely important that I'm somewhat connected to whoever the subject is going to be. So that's something else I thought about in pre-production. And then the power of questions, bro. When you are listening to interviews or like reading interviews like for magazines and stuff like that, it may sound like questions, but the questions are very, very powerful tools in order to get through said story. So to be the person in control of those things, I'm like, oh, like this is the real deal and this is special. Then when we get into actual like production, like on the set, I'm having to think about how portable is my setup? Are there some things I need to change? Do I need to get another lens? How is this going to show up in post while I'm filming this? Like, what's the best way? What's the best angle? How do I fix exposure and stuff on the camera? Like, I'm having to learn all of that on the fly. So I think one of them, I kind of just left the aperture and auto, but I had control of the ISO, stuff like that. And then thinking about how certain camera angles and stuff create certain overall, not just visual aesthetic, but what kind of emotions does this convey? Do I want to add in this here or that here? Kind of thinking about what are some things I'm going to add in post while I'm standing there. And then also learning about questions on site. So originally I had shown up with 20 million bajillion questions. And then I was like, you know what, this person's going to give me a response. I don't need to fully direct them as to the direction that it needs to go. Some of this is a rough guideline, and then we want things to flow. And then I'm going to figure out opportunity to get them to elaborate. On set, I was able to really experience the power of storytelling and my very talented ability to get the story rolling, like being like, okay, this is what this person had to say. This is incredible. How do we further showcase this incredible thing that they just said in more depth? And really being able to get them to go there and really think about this special aspect, and then seeing the story toward the end. Oof. I'm like, maybe I do know what I'm doing. Like, this is pretty damn good. And then I moved into post. Post was a completely different process. I had to be a little bit more strategic since there was more footage. And this is my first time like really, really doing B-roll this way, making sure that the other stuff that I'm adding in is a part of the story, and then also checking for continuity. While I was playing around in post this time, I really pushed myself to learn DaVinci Resolve the best way that I could. There were some things that I knew, but I've learned so much more. So it took a while, but it's definitely valuable. And while playing around with it in post-production, I learned so much of all the different effects that it offers, different ways to play around with color. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the coolest technological canvas that a girl can have. So I'm very excited to continue to play around and experiment with some of those cool tools that I saw in there throughout the rest of this incredible series. I also learned in post the complexity of editing someone else who is not me. Chris, that y'all saw, has a completely different speech pattern than I do. So a lot of the editing that I do is based off of the waveform. So I'm like figuring out how much space is in between the words, cutting out all the ands and the ums. And for me, when I do the ands and the ums, I go and the ums are so far apart, and the ands are so easy to differentiate from the next word in the waveform. It's easy to just cut. This particular person goes and I. So like the is connected to the next word, and that was a bitch to edit. I didn't cut out all of them because people naturally say and anyway, but I'm like, okay, like this is completely different. Somebody else who does. I might end up interviewing someone else who talks faster. He didn't necessarily talk faster. It was just a different pattern. But editing someone who may have maybe a scattered train of thought that kind of goes all over the place, that might be an experience in itself. I have not come across that yet, but we'll see. I might end up talking about that. Lastly, I learned about the power of collaboration. Man, I knew it was going to do well, but we didn't know it was going to do this well on Instagram. Instagram has been blowing up. I'm talking thousands of views. I got 100 followers. We got thousands of views like that, but we did it. And it just, to me, it was confirmation to keep going, to keep showcasing folks in my community, and to keep learning and growing my skill set as a director producer, and that my ideas are special and important. And there's so many beautiful and incredible stories out there that need to be told. And I'm sent here to do it. Let's hop into director's reflections. The first thing I want to get into, just reflecting on like everything that has happened since I posted that first doc, is the performance on Instagram. I made this whole big deal about getting away from short form content and moving into long form content, feeling like it was a better fit for me. I don't have to minimize myself or my voice or whatever projects that I want to do, interviews that I want to do. I can tell a full, well-rounded story rather than having to be condensed into a couple of minutes. Just for me to create that beautiful piece, which I'm glad I did, and then chop it up and then it do numbers on Instagram. I said, ain't that a mother freaker? Okay. I'm surprised that it did do as well after like looking at my analytics and stuff on the back end. The Instagram promo clips that I pulled did a really good job for moving traffic into YouTube, moving traffic into the podcast audio. I'm glad I also did it because I remember not too long ago, someone had asked me about the podcast. Like they were aware that I was doing the podcast, but they had questions about like what exactly it was about or what was going on. I was kind of quietly experimenting, putting things up, allowing people to listen that weren't necessarily associated with me. But it got to the point where I'm like, let me just look at my Instagram and think from the perspective of someone who does not know me, and I'm telling them that I have a podcast, or I'm telling them that I make short documentaries. And there was little to no evidence at all that that's what I did. So that prompted me to allow myself to turn some of this long form content into several pieces of short form content. Other thing that I really had to realize is just because people are viewing the short form clips, it does not necessarily mean that it's going to translate the majority into long form viewers. So like we have thousands of views on Instagram, and it didn't necessarily translate into thousands of views on YouTube, which honestly is okay. I'm glad that after making that switch to long form content, really telling the stories, really showing the skills that I do have, now I'm actively building this body of work. I'm actively building this portfolio in a way that I feel is more impactful. And I'm also feeding the masses the short form pieces of the story. And if people choose to engage further, they can. Kind of like I've said before in previous episodes, all of this for me on social media, like social media itself is not the end all be all. We are directing and producing things out here. That's what we want to do. And I'm liking the results of diversifying. I think I also just mentioned collaboration. That was a beautiful experience as well. So I was able to actively see the incredible support system that Chris has. It'll be awesome to see how I can expand my community while collaborating with others. It's already started, which is beautiful. I love the experience of our communities overlapping, intersecting, and growing and connecting with each other. That's the overall goal. So that was great. The other direct reflection that I have, I kind of realized a lot of folks that casually view short form aren't necessarily thinking about who is behind the camera making this stuff and it shows. Not necessarily a bad thing, because at one point in time, I wasn't either thinking about stuff that is a little bit more produced, who is behind the camera, and just how important the role is of a director and a producer until I had to put myself in that position. And even how even the way that the narrative flows and post with the editor. And I'm also the freaking editor on top of that. It's a lot of work. All of it is incredibly necessary for the story. Of course, I am intentionally interviewing incredible people with incredible stories, but it also takes an incredible creative to be able to figure out the best way to shine the story in what I believe to be the best light and to be displayed effectively the most within whatever period of time that the video is going to end up being, right? The next piece I'm going to reflect on is this process has shown me just how great my mind is and my capacity, especially for someone who's so new, that I am very talented. Okay. Like, let me pat myself on the back. But I'm very talented, and talking to Chris after sending him the completed doc on him was very eye-opening, because as far as he's concerned is I'm like a community member that he trusted their vision. I showed up to his home and his visionary sanctum. I told him the questions that I was going to ask. I set up the video. Like, he loved the background, loved the concept. Then like the questions, he was really enjoying the questions, and especially the additional ones that I added to further expand and to show the vibrancy of the story that he has to tell. And that was it. Shot a little bit of B-roll. Like, the B-roll is obviously silenced, but it's just us chatting in the background while I'm getting B-roll of the room and then the finished pieces that he had framed. He didn't know how the fuck that was going to turn out. So to send it to him and him being like, wow. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, like, wow, because he didn't know it was going to look like that. He didn't know the B-roll was going to turn into an intro. I didn't know the B-roll was going to turn into an intro until I looked at it and my brain was like, bing, 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 bing. Like, you're going to put it like this, you're going to add a little bit of music, a little bit of fun, and zoom in like that. And it looks pretty fucking good if I say so myself. Shit. Our intros, it's stunning. Like, and that's light work. I know I can challenge myself more, and I know that I can go harder than that. But that was very, very eye-opening to see someone's perspective outside of me. Obviously, as an artist, your story is sensitive. Your art is a sensitive topic, and it is great to hear that this artist who trusted me being my very, very first subject was very happy with the way that I was able to handle their story. And so now I have this lovely piece to add to my portfolio, a piece that was a very expansive experience for me. And I know I've talked about like moving away from this idea of being a content creator and like really showing up as a producer and director. But that piece was extra legitimizing for myself. All of this work is for me. The impact isn't for me, but the experience, the journey with myself through artistic development, this is also a part of my story. To solidify that, like really solidify like a strong beginning to a portfolio of many beautiful things to come, has been such a beautiful and motivating experience. There will be a lot more. Okay, y'all. So usually the word is just a word, but today we got a PSA, a very passionate PSA. What inspired this PSA is there was two quotes that had came to mind recently as I was diving even deeper into our current political climate, and it is, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that was a quote from Martin Luther King. The next quote, or paraphrasing of the quote, by Toni Morrison that comes up a lot is that an aspect or a facet of white supremacy is constantly having to explain, because constantly having to explain is a time waster. So my PSA is, please do not engage with folks on the internet who believe that Black folks are ignorant to human rights violations. That thought itself is inherently anti-Black. To believe that the ignorance of some Black people is representative of all Black people is an anti-Black thought. Black people are aware of just how bad things are and just how bad things can get. And that is why Black people consistently show up. Nobody is free until Black and Indigenous folks are free globally. A fight for the rights of Black people is simply human rights. Please stop trying to change the opinions of white supremacists on the internet. They are fully aware that their personal politic involves robbing you of your humanity for personal gain. The smoke and mirrors is simply to convince themselves that their ideas are fair and just. Without justification of racism, all they have is the truth when they look in the mirror. The truth is that they are the primitive beast with the propensity for violence that they say we are. You see, it's a pattern. Oppress people and tell them it isn't okay to fight back, out of the fear that we are just like them, constantly running from the fear of their own violence. Damn. Like I mentioned earlier, injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. And one day, injustice just might show up at your door. All right, that's all I have for you guys today. Visionary Sanctum on all platforms, Instagram, YouTube, and every podcast platform. Keep a lookout for the next episode. A lot more great content to come. Until next time.